God creates everything out of nothing, and everything which God is to use, he first reduces to nothing. The deepest form of despair is to choose to be another than himself. Happiness is the greatest hiding place for despair. Once you are born in this world, you are old enough to die. A genius may perhaps be a century ahead of his age, and hence stands there as a paradox. But in the end, the race will assimilate what was once a paradox, so it is no longer paradoxical. The truth is lived before it is understood. It must be fought for, tested, and appropriated. Truth is the way. Anyone will easily understand it if he just gives himself to it. The unhappy person is never present to themselves because they always live in the past or the future. To cheat oneself out of love is the most terrible deception. It is an eternal loss for which there is no reparation, either in time or in eternity. Confidence is the present tense of hope. To be a woman is something so strange, so confusing and so complicated that only a woman could put up with it. The minority is always stronger than the majority, because the minority is generally formed by those who really have an opinion. For without risk there is no faith, and the greater the risk, the greater the faith. It is better to try something and fail than to try nothing and succeed. The result may be the same, but you won't be. We always grow more through defeats than victories. It is not where we breathe, but where we love, that we live. A man prayed, and at first he thought that prayer was talking. But he became more and more quiet until in the end he realized prayer is listening. It is not the path which is the difficulty, rather, it is the difficulty which is the path. Love is the expression of the one who loves, not of the one who is loved. Those who think they can love only the people they prefer do not love at all. Love discovers truths about individuals that others cannot see. Most people are subjective toward themselves and objective toward all others, frightfully objective sometimes, but the task is precisely to be objective toward oneself and subjective toward all others. People settle for a level of despair they can tolerate and call it happiness. I found I had less and less to say until finally I became silent and began to listen. I discovered in the silence the voice of God. The most painful state of being is remembering the future, particularly the one you'll never have. The most common form of despair is not being who you are. It seems essential, in relationships and all tasks, that we concentrate only on what is most significant and important. There are two ways to be fooled. One is to believe what isn't true, the other is to refuse to believe what is true. Faith is the highest passion in a human being. Many in every generation may not come that far, but none comes further. Personality is only ripe when a man has made the truth his own. The truth is a snare. You cannot have it without being caught. You cannot have the truth in such a way that you catch it, but only in such a way that it catches you. It belongs to the imperfection of everything human that man can only attain his desire by passing through its opposite. Marriage brings one into fatal connection with custom and traditions and customs are like the wind and weather, altogether incalculable. It is so hard to believe, because it is so hard to obey. Far from idleness being the root of all evil, it is rather the only true good. During the first period of a man's life, the greatest danger is not to take the risk. It was completely fruitless to quarrel with the world, whereas the quarrel with oneself was occasionally fruitful and always, she had to admit, interesting. At the bottom of enmity between strangers lies indifference. Most men pursue pleasure with such breathless haste that they hurry past it. People understand me so poorly that they don't even understand my complaint about them not understanding me. The more a man can forget, the greater the number of metamorphoses which his life can undergo. The more he can remember, the more divine his life becomes. The function of prayer is not to influence God, but rather to change the nature of the one who prays. Not just in commerce, but in the world of ideas too, our age is putting on a veritable clearance sale. Everything can be had so dirt cheap that one begins to wonder whether in the end anyone will want to make a bid. A man who is a physical being is always turned toward the outside, thinking that his happiness lies outside him, finally turns inward and discovers that the source is within him. What is a poet? An unhappy person who conceals profound anguish in his heart, but whose lips are so formed that as sighs and cries pass over them, they sound like beautiful music. Trouble is the common denominator of living. It is the great equalizer. There is nothing with which every man is so afraid as getting to know how enormously much he is capable of doing and becoming. Face the facts of being what you are, for that is what changes what you are. Life has its own hidden forces which you can only discover by living. The highest and most beautiful things in life are not to be heard about, nor read about, nor seen, but if one will, are to be lived. Patience is necessary, and one cannot reap immediately where one has sown. I see it all perfectly. There are two possible situations. One can either do this or that. My honest opinion and my friendly advice is this: do it or do not do it. You will regret both. The tyrant dies, and his rule is over. The martyr dies, and his rule begins. People demand freedom of speech as a compensation for the freedom of thought which they seldom use. Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. Life is not a problem to be solved, but a reality to be experienced. Take a chance, and you may lose. Take not a chance, and you have lost already. It is the duty of the human understanding to understand that there are things which it cannot understand. The more people who believe something, the more apt it is to be wrong. The person who's right often has to stand alone. If I could prescribe only one remedy for all the ills of the modern world, I would prescribe silence. Truth is not something you can appropriate easily and quickly. You certainly cannot sleep or dream yourself to the truth. No, you must be tried, do battle, and suffer if you are to acquire the truth for yourself. It is a sheer illusion to think that in relation to the truth there is an abridgment, a shortcut that dispenses with the necessity for struggling for it. The commandment is that you shall love, but when you understand life and yourself, then it is as if you should not need to be commanded, because to love human beings is still the only thing worth living for. Without this life you really do not live. The road well begun is the battle half won. The important thing is to make a beginning and get underway. It is more blessed to give than to receive, but then it is also more blessed to be able to do without than to have to have.